Hello everybody, and welcome to My Hero Academia chapter number 372 review. This chapter is titled Naked. So last time in the whole My Hero Academia expanded universe, pretty much Shoji had a big face-off with a big enhanced dumb spinner, and Shoji pretty much used one of his moves, Octo Blow, to help, well, almost destroy Spinner. Or he was getting ready to fire it. He didn't actually land a punch or anything. And also there was a whole plot point with Koda being like, we know that Shoji has suffered the most, and a little bit of a Shoji backstory with, at this point, Koda pretty much just being like, don't lay a finger on Shoji. He knows that more than anyone. And this chapter, we actually start off with a flashback where Shoji and Koda ask Mr. Aizawa and All Might to assign them to defending Central Hospital. Aizawa and All Might are like, how do you find out? We never told you about that. And Shoji says that the big animal woman who Deku saved and was sort of important during the Deku Return to UA arc said some troubling things, and Shoji had asked more about what's going on there. And some of the refugees also mentioned something about a call to action that is how they learned about the whole group of hedomorphs are going after the hospital. And Koda hasn't said anything up to this point, but he's like, if Shoji's going, then so am I. As we see that Shoji is saying, standing back while this plays out would mean I can never call myself a hero. And we see that Aizawa was there with his all busted eye and everything, and he just closes his eyes and he thinks, we spread false rumors about where he was transferred, but they didn't take the bait whatsoever. As we see Eraserhead again, Aizawa asks President Mike to, he's like, Yamada, I hate to ask, but can you be there to support the boys? And President Mike's there and he's doing his whole thing. He's like, know this, Aizawa. They say quirks get stronger by the generation. These kids, no, these young men are already way stronger than we were back in our day, as his three dummigos. As he pretty much talks about Aizawa, President Mike there, Yamada, and Shirikumo back in the day when they were going around UA being a bunch of a dumb trio, right? And we also see here that Shoji has grown his horns out, right? And these horns are, we get a little flashback here to Koda and his mother, I'm guessing. And there's just a little dialogue saying, one day, Koji, you might grow, your horns might grow too. And with these horns, you'll be able to beam your thoughts and feelings to animals that are even farther away. As pretty much we see that Koda has summoned all of the birds in an area, and all of these birds are just swarming Mandible, and all of these birds end up swarming Mandible. And we get just a little dialogue thing. And it's like, your mama has put up with some real big cruelty due to, by the way it looks, but your dad got so riled up on my behalf. Those two people do not mock any horns. And we get some dialogue that I guess Koji's heard in the past. And it's like, Koji, it's okay to be mad. Grow up to be a man who gets mad when people mock something or something big or dear to you. As we see that Shoji uses his Octo Spansion against Spinner. Who's his face? President Mike also uses one of his sounds attacks, but more importantly, Koji uses the Hitchcock Burge with his newfound quirk expansion, I guess you could say, as his horns is fully grown and Mandible is pretty much down for the count. Spinner's taken a big beating from what Shoji did, and we see that Shoji has also taken some big recoil from all of the scales, or the scale mail quirk that Spinner has. Shoji's just like, what will you choose to protect with those giant scales and a giant body? Tell me, Spinner. And he's like, the rest of you two, what are you hoping to protect with your gifts and your power? Don't let them exploit your wounds, as he thinks back to Aoyama being the traitor and everything that he went through and how All For One exploited his wounds. He's like, don't let them exploit your wounds. Your children might be the next target. And he's just screaming this. And he thinks back to the little girl he saved. And they're like, if I've never fell in that river, you would have never hurt your face and made it all scary. but Shoji's just to, like, be better than mere Avengers. As we see that now the whole scale mailed and crazy spinners is like, the grudge never fades. And all of the people on below are like, Rep, what are you talking about? And Spinner's like, if heroes win today, nothing will change. And all of the, all of the army of heteromorphs are like, oh, it's a call to action. We heard that all night. As Spinner continues to yell, for the crime of walking in public, they sprayed me with pesticide. When they hit us, we hit them back. Brethren, be heard, follow me. As we see that his face is completely taken over by scale mail, right? He doesn't, Spinner doesn't even have eyes anymore. He's just been completely consumed. I mean, his tongue even has these scales on it, right? As he jumps off the building that he was on straight for Central Hospital. And Shoji just thinks, even stronger now, with enough power to break that concrete, what's going on? As we see all of the heteromorphs are getting their weapons ready in their hands, as we see the gorilla cop that we have seen a few times, he's like, they're even more fired up, there's too many of them, can't take much more. As we see, he starts to pull a gun, as signifying that he may end up having to seriously harm some of these rioters. As what ends up happening is Spinner crashes through the hospital doors, as we sort of get some more dialogue from All For One, as we just get this information of Kurogiri was transferred into the research wing. Once you reach him, play a recording of either Mai or Tomura's voice. And we see Spinner some more of in his mind stuff. He's like, Kurogiri's quirk will bring conflict to an end. As we see that some of these, some of these heteromorphs again are rushing into the building. We see one who specifically has a pig-like appearance. I'm going to call him Pigman. And we see that there's the inpatient ward, and there's a bunch of doctors just standing in front and blocking it off. We specifically see the sort of Yoshi-looking doctor that we have seen a few times before in the series. The first time it really comes to note is whenever there was the whole thing of Deku's arms may never be the same again, and also telling us what was up with Bakugo right after the war. And we see that this pig doctor, or this pig dude, looks at this, and he sort of takes a second and looks at all these doctors swearing to protect these people. We see Spinner is now sort of getting back to a weakened state as he's thinking, all for Tomura's sake, you will become a hero, as the scale mail is starting to fall off. And we see the Pigman, he's looking around, and he remembers Shoji's scream of, don't give up, don't let their minds get to you, don't let them exploit your wounds. And he sort of sees this, and he sees one of these doctors sort of just helping out the people of the town, and he's sort of there. It may be like a father or somebody he knows, but he thinks about it, and him and all the other heteromorphs just stop, realizing what they are doing is really wrong. As we see Spinner sort of thinking in his right mind, he's sort of like, I thought I never get to be anyone, but by following you, maybe I can really be somebody. Shigaraki, just watch me. I've got all my allies behind me. As we see Spinner sort of as a younger kid, or not quite the vigilante that became in the League of Villains, or the villain in that regard, sort of just a younger sort of Spinner. He's running through the walls of the hospital, cracking and destroying a bunch of stuff. As we see the image of behind Spinner, there's nobody. And we even see Spinner with all the scale mail stuff look back, and there's nobody there. We also see Present Mike at this point just say, Shoji must have gotten through to them. And listen, that guy in there ain't gonna be erased into whole, as he sort of just walks through, as both Spinner and Present Mike both yell out to Kurogiri, as they both yell out, as Spinner yells out Kurogiri and Present Mike yells out Shirikumo, and we see the black void of Kurogiri, as we've really come to know him, is just there motionless, and there's no reaction at all to any of it. And that's where the chapter ends, with this decisive moment of what will happen. Will Present Mike and Shoji and Koda's efforts all come to fruition, or will Spinner and the Heteromorph's armies come more into fruition, even if the Heteromorph armies have stopped. Another 15-page chapter. Again, Horikoshi has been putting out a lot of these recently, but most of the art is really good in this chapter, and it's more of just this war stuff. Again, all of the Heteromorph stuff put aside, and the racism that sort of comes with that in My Hero Academia universe. I think this is a good chapter. The message of why the Heteromorphs decided to quit is a big one that definitely takes a lot of time to get through. It's definitely not straightforward at all, but the panel where Spinner's like, I've got my allies all behind me, to only look behind him and nobody's there, is a very good visual. The other thing with like Coda and his horns growing out, it's sort of just shoved into a corner. I mean, whenever I think of the Class 1A members, the last one I tend to think of is Coda, just because he's sort of just there. I mean, he isn't really useful for most of the series. I mean, in the, what's it called, My Hero Academia Ultra Analysis book, if I'm not mistaken, there's a quotes section in that book, right? And all of his quotes pretty much come from the time that him and Jiro had to team up to take on Present Mike, actually, in the, what was it? In the final exam arc of the story around chapter 80-ish and around there. And that's really all that Coda's done throughout the series. Or Koji, my bad, not Coda. Coda is the little boy from the training camp. But Koji just really hasn't done a lot of stuff. And, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about it. I mean, there's nothing here that really makes me think like, oh great, his big villain that he took down was Mandible with a bunch of birds. Wow, that's sort of cool. While Shoji, I can at least like his efforts a bit more because of he has done more in the series, and even if he isn't a prominent character, I don't even think Shoji's in the top 10 of all the My Hero Academia characters, but he's at least very interesting and a more interesting character than Coda is, or Koji. And that's really all I have to say about chapter. Next chapter, of course, we get the whole final decision of what happens with Kurogiri, aka Shirikumo, and again, the whole situation with Shirikumo and Present Mike and the backstory between the three Damigos, as they call them in this chapter, it is locked behind the Vigilante's paywall, but that's besides the point. This chapter was a decent chapter. Altogether, I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10. I mean, it's nothing perfect, but it also sort of furthers the plot around, and hey, we get to see Yoshi and Mushroom Doctor again. Gotta love that. This will be Glowplasma231 out.